today we're going to be learning about the percent equation. Now, this is going to look very familiar to you because we've already learned the percent proportion, right? What's our percent proportion?
A over B.
A over B equals P over 100. Okay? So now we're learning today a different way to solve those problems. All right? We could still use the proportion on actually all of these and get the correct answer. But we're going to solve them a different way using today the percent equation. All right, so the first thing you need written in your notes is A equals P percent times B. A equals P percent times B. This is our percent equation. And here's the good news. A still represents the exact same thing it did in the proportion. It's the part. And what's my key word for A? Is. And what's my key word for B? Of. And then any percentage will always be plugged in for P. All right, so please go ahead and write down the percent equation in your notes. All right, now it's important, and you don't have to write any of this other stuff down, but I want you to see, what is this? What do I call this? A over B equals P over 100. What do I call it?
Proportion.
The percent proportion, right? Now, if I were to give you this problem, what is 30% of 240? Could you use the percent proportion to solve that? Yeah, you could. And you could use the percent equation. So you could actually use either one and you would get the exact same answer. All right, so what does that tell you? It just tells you that there's more than one way to do the problem. Okay, so you've already learned how to do the proportion, and now today you're going to learn how to plug these numbers into the percent equation. All right, so in example 1, we're finding part of the base. Now, what I want you to write at the beginning of every single one of these problems is your percent equation. A equals P percent times B. And if you're looking along with me on page 432, in example 1, it tells us, in the real world example on the top of page 432, it says, your class has raised 80% of its goal of $8,000 for a trip to Washington, D.C. How much money has your class raised? So out of that information, does it give me a percentage?
Yes.
What is my percentage? It is 80%. Now, make sure that in your equation, you write it 80%. Do not just say 80. And you'll see why in a second. And then it says, of its goal of $8,000. So is $8,000 my part, or is it my whole?
Your part. Whole.
Read it. Of keyword $8,000. It's my whole. It's B. So 80% times $8,000. But can I just multiply 80 times 8,000? What do I need to do to my percentage before I can multiply it by any number? Alicia? I need to write it as a decimal, and that's what we learned yesterday. So what is 80% as a decimal? 0.8. Now multiply it by 8,000. And it gives you your answer. Okay? So, in the percent equation, one of the biggest things that you have to remember is if it gives you a percentage, you must change it to a decimal before you multiply. Don't forget that. If you forget, then you're going to get the wrong answer. All right, now in example 2, we're just solving for a different part of the percent equation. Okay, so we still start with the percent equation, A equals P percent times B. But in example 2, it says what percent, so what don't I know? I don't know the percent of 150 is 90. So 150 is B, 90 is A. Anybody confused of why? Remember, B, my key word is of. It says of 150, so I know 150 goes in for B. Is my key word for A, so I know 90 goes in for A. Now let me ask you this. I have a variable multiplied by a number. Is there an easier way that I could write that to make it easier to solve? A variable times a number? How else could I write that? Don't let the percentage sign throw you off. If I said x times 5, how else could you write x times 5? You could write it 5x, right? So P percent times 150, I could write it as 150 P. 150 times P. I'm still multiplying B times the percentage, right? I just wrote it that way to make it easier to solve now for P percent, to solve for P. And I could still write the percentage sign. 150 times P percent. So how could I solve for P? How could I solve for the percentage? What do I need to do? Alicia? Divide both sides by 150. I've got to get P by itself. But now I get a decimal. Is a decimal what I'm looking for in my answer? No, I'm looking for a percentage. So to get a percentage, I need to convert that decimal to a percent, and that will be my answer. Okay? So when I'm solving for percent, one step is going to be to rewrite the equation in a more friendly way so that I can see what I need to divide by. Then the next step is going to be converting that decimal into my percentage for my final answer. Okay? So there's a couple things that are a little bit different when you're solving for percent here. Any questions? Any questions? So, example 3, guess what? We are now, whoops, sorry, hold on. Just lost it. Give me a second. Come on. There we go. All right, so now in example 3, now we're just solving for a different part again. Example 3 says the number 117 is 45% of what number? I know I'm emphasizing that, but what do you think you're solving for? If it says of what number, what are you solving for? Of what number? You're solving for B. You don't know B. 117 is my is, so that goes in for A. I have a percentage, and I'm multiplying it by B. But what do I need to do before I can multiply 45% times B? I need to do what? Change it to a decimal. I hope more than one person knows that, right? You guys knew that? She just beat you to it? Okay, so change it to a decimal. And remember, anytime you're multiplying a number times a variable, just write them together. That shows multiplication. Makes it easier for you to see what to do next. What do you need to do next, Chris?
How come you didn't put 0.45% and then B?
No, because I changed the percent to a decimal.
Oh.
So I drop my percentage when I convert it, okay? Now I'm going to divide both sides by 0.45, and I get B equals 260. Okay, so really, you just plug in the numbers, and then don't forget to convert your percent to a decimal before you divide both sides. Okay, so anytime, it's really probably just a good rule of thumb, when you're using the percent equation, anytime you have a percentage, just change it to a decimal. Okay, just change it to a decimal right away so you don't forget. All right, any questions on example 3? Anything? Okay, I want you to do your turn now, numbers 3 and 4. All right, now here's where we kind of apply a little bit of a real-world situation to this concept. We're still using A equals P percent times B. But let's read the problem on the bottom page 433. It says a shoe salesperson sells a pair of shoes for $125. The salesperson receives a 9% commission on the sale. How much is the commission? So let's look at $125. Do you think that's the total? Is that what he made off of it? What the store made off of it? What do you think? The total or the part? 125. It's the total, right? That's how much they sold the shoes for, $125. Now, I know that he made 9% of that total sale. So I need to change the 9% to a decimal, multiply it by 125, and it tells me how much his commission was. All right? So again, it's just applying the percent equation, that principle, to something you might see in real life. You know, you go to the store, you buy a pair of shoes, they make a commission. Now you can, figure out how much they actually made when they sold you those shoes. if you know what their commission is. If you understand that, that's everything you need to know for 9.4.